Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my guest on, but I'm going to let him introduce himself. So why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
My name is Chris Stewart. I'm the CEO of Brightbeam, the publisher of EdPost. Online, you might know me as Citizen Stewart on Twitter, Facebook, and all of the channels. Why do I do what I do? I do what I do because a lot of what we do is because of what happened in your childhood. And for me, I was not a great student, didn't have a great experience in school. Became a dad. When I became a dad, I became very serious about school again. That's why I'm here. I became an advocate, then an activist based upon my own child. And then, now I've got more kids in public school. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. Especially being that it's rooted in, so much of how you have to show up, as a Black man in these yet to be United States of America, for sure. So honored to have you here. So I came across an article that you had written recently that I wanted to kind of use as a backdrop for discussion. And for those who will listen to this recording, they can go back and reference it. But an article that you wrote recently, hold on, let me pull up the title so I can make sure I put some respect on it. Be careful about Republican advice to Democrats on education. Talk to me just about the impetus for writing the article and what you hope the readers would get out of, the work you put into that.
I think the main thing is that there's going to be an attempt for Kamala Harris to move to the center and to be centrist. And that's what I meant by be careful of the advice that you get from Republicans, because there's a lot of moderate Republican types in education reform and in education world who would tempt Democrats to lose some of their progressive vigor. And, I'm worried about her in this one way, in that she can make a choice to do what Trump does, which is go to her base, her progressive base, and honor them. Or she could pick a centrist as her running mate, a more corporate Democrat, and pursue a nothing agenda for education, meaning not a lot of meat there. I don't expect that that's what she's going to do, but I was responding to the fact that she's starting to get these articles written about her by Republicans who are like, well, if she wants to succeed, she should push patriotism education. That's like one of the things they're saying, because that would be bipartisan. We all could agree with that. We need to teach patriotism in schools. And that's something she could do as an immigrant, as a child of immigrants. She could say, hey, listen, my parents came here because it's the greatest country on earth, and it worked out for me. That's what they want her to say. As part of her education agenda, they want her to recommit to mental slavery.
That's a bar. So let's stay there for a second. For those who are listening, who may come from I'm going to use the word more traditional lens, might feel like, well, teaching is almost apolitical. Teaching isn't political in and of itself. I have a myriad of opinions about that. But before I say anything, talk to me about how would you respond to someone who says, no, these things, politics and all of these things shouldn't, they don't have a place in teaching. You just go in, teach the curriculum, and you come home.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that that's ahistorical for Black folks. So if you think about the history of Black education, my ace in this, what I'm about to say, is Vanessa Siddle Walker, Dr. Vanessa Siddle Walker. She's the ace on this. She's done the research on this for years. Pre-Brown, Black educators were political. They actually were teaching young Black people the core subjects. And in addition to that, they were teaching them about how to participate in democracy. So they saw it as their mission, not just to educate them on the so-called 3 R's, but also to help them engage in their freedom. And part of that was understanding voting, understanding how the branches of government work, understanding civic process so that you can be a part of it. That was part of the Black education tradition all the way up until Brown. And all those Black schools, the ones that we closed because they were so terrible because they didn't have enough white people in them. All of those schools had a Black pedagogy, right? It had been developed by Black educators for years and shared across state lines, right? So they had a pretty sophisticated network of transferring their knowledge to each other. The interesting thing about that is that I don't know that we're ready to go back to seeing our students, Black students, as not just students like everybody else, but students that have special needs. And by special needs, I mean special cultural needs, to reattach them to their own history. We are teaching them now from a white Western tradition. And prior to Brown, I think the Black educator prior to Brown was different than the Black educator today. I'll just put it that way.
Oh, 100%. I see it even in like my own practice as I glean from, you know, ancestral wisdom, if you will, and look back to those who've gone before and done this work. You know, most of the history that I was given, taught, learned is, you know, like I a lot of who I am as a person has gone to. I have to go back and get it, if you will, right? Like this, it
Mm-hmm,
wasn't given to
mm-hmm,
me. Um, you know, there was they wanted me to believe that Rosa sat, Malcolm walked, and hooray, racism is dead. And
mm-hmm,
and thinking through that paradigm, I would so agree and say that so much of what we do as educators is tied to, you know, the political world outside. You vote for the local school boards who have agendas and items that will deeply affect how you do your job and what you do, what you won't do.
mm-hmm,
Elected officials, at the state level, so on and so forth. And so the idea that we can come into our classrooms and be divorced from that is just not a privilege that many folks who look like you and I have. One that I would
mm-hmm.
care to even be involved in. Like I think tying those things to our experience and being able to speak truth to power is part of the identity of for
Absolutely.
and
And
so,
I think like it would be malpractice to
yeah,
do what
yeah,
you
that's
just
good.
said. That would be malpractice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you alluded to it a little bit there when you referenced the article and the conservative um leanings that they are asking Kamala to push to. But there is this push, and I see it now because my better half works for Charter School Alliance in Jersey. And
Mm-hmm,
so I am the traditional public school administrator, right? And there is this traditional public school versus public charter divide debate that happens, and that I'm not that person. However, um, there is a sense in which they want us to be divided and think about things differently, and this branch of school is stealing money from this branch of school, and
mm-hmm,
so on and so forth. But you push it a little bit further. You differentiate between progressive and conservative charter schools.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So help us out. What makes a charter school progressive versus conservative in your view?
There are charter schools that are rooted in the communities that they come from. They have a level of indigeneity to them, and you can tell by the community partnerships that they have how much they value community and how much respect that they have for where they teach and how they teach. Then you also have these corporate big box charter schools, right? These corporate big box, like the Best Buys of charter, the Walmarts of charter. They have basically a corporate charter mentality, which is units and logistics. And, we got to get the kids moving from class to class in a minute and 13 seconds. And so the only way we could do that is we have to make them put their finger on the mouth and blow air like that, and then have them
Hmm.
walk in silence like slaves. That's the difference. So the real difference is how rooted in the community. So listen, you want to start a charter school. I live in Minnesota, the birthplace of charter schools. We don't have big box charter schools. We don't have chains. We have all mom and pop, homegrown, culturally affirming charter schools for the most part. We have Black
Hmm.
charter schools. We have girls and boys charter schools. We have Hmong charter schools. We have Native American charter schools, right? The Somali Americans, a lot of newcomers to this country, they get bullied out of the regular traditional schools. So we have charter schools for that. Like we have places where they can go and keep their language. The reason we have Hmong charter schools is they wanted to keep their language. They wanted to keep their
Yeah.
kids intact, and they were losing that in the traditional schools. I don't really see the divide between. This is what I think public education writ large, traditional, conventional public education has this board that they're playing on right now, and they have a lot of options for how they can deliver education. And right now, you have private school movements taking foot, right? That really does take money out of the district school, and it takes students and it puts them in an unregulated market where there are no rules. They don't even have civil rights in those schools. So the response from public education right now is to stop fighting with itself and start saying, how many families can we serve with magnet schools, charter schools, interdistrict schools, boys and girls schools, separate. If you're a superintendent, you've got all this stuff at your disposal. So,
Yeah.
because I've been on that school choice side before, my advice right now is to stop fighting with yourself and to start reacting to private school choice, because in places like Arizona, it has caused almost $1 billion deficit. And that money is going to come out of public schooling. It's going to come out of traditional district schooling. So that would be my response to the supposed divide. Also, for Black people, I would say stay out of them. The white left and the white right fight about a lot of things, and some of them we need to step out of. That kind of charter versus this and that and the other, the white left and the white black, or the white left and the white right, let them battle that stuff out. If I'm a Black superintendent, I'm looking at my entire game board and I'm figuring out how I can serve as many families as I possibly can with all the tools that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the antiquated response has been, well, if the school, for example, one district that I've worked with, there is a K through 8 about charter school, and then there is another high school that's like a technical high school, and a lot of the students choose to go to these other places because of what they're offered at the public school, safety and choice, things like that. And then the rhetoric around it is, well, we're losing, money and things to those places. And I think we have to get out of the mindset of this was our money. The money follows the child, right? And that's where the money goes. And so if we're offering, and one, if we're centering the child, then we want that child to be educated in the best way possible. And I think that sometimes we, you know, the worst sides of what I'm going to say is traditional public is we want to control that dollar because of whatever have you, or because of the how we understand those things, and it creates this divide that's just unnecessary.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
I want to put a pin in something on that, because I have this thing I say often, which is Black students are the new cotton. So everybody wants to keep them in a seat and harvest them for their per pupil income. So when you are moving around Black bodies from one building to another, they start arguing about your per pupil income, not about what you're learning. So they want your body, but they don't want your mind. They don't want your head. Black children are the most studied children in history, and they're the least taught. Right. So all the study they've been doing to Black children since the 70s, they've been studying Black children, and they still haven't figured out a way to teach them, except for people like Ronald Edmonds, who said, we can teach any kid that we so choose when we decide to do it. And he was behind the whole effective schools movement, and we have a tradition of that, like Barbara Sizemore, Dr. Asa Hilliard, and others who they have their own vocabulary about our children. So this whole thing around the per pupil, like who's getting the money for our kids, that's so crude as a conversation, number one. And then number two, I would have a question for traditional districts. If that charter school or whatever school is stealing your students and eating your lunch, every state in the United States allows districts to start charters, allows them to start charters. It allows them to start teacher-led schools, teacher-run schools, right? So why is that school eating your lunch? Like, why don't you have one of those schools, right? In some cases, it's less expensive. I was a member of the Minneapolis Public School Board. So I was an elected member of the school board. And this is a point that we used to make. There was a portion of the district administration that's all they did was think about new schools, like within the district context. So they created new district programs. They had an Afrocentric school inside of a school. They developed all these things to meet the needs. If you don't have a superintendent that's doing that, man, don't blame charter schools. Blame your superintendent. I'm going to
Mm,
get in trouble for that. Someone here is going to, have a daddy or a mama who's like a superintendent or something. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
I hate to say it,
yeah, but I think that there is a sense in which, right, like if we're going to ask, students to be reflective about things, and this is how they grow in their craft, and then we do the same thing with teachers. They should hold up the mirror to themselves and look at their practices, their paradigms, right, and the policies that support all three, right, and then, but as you trek up the proverbial ladder, there seems that there's less of that reflective practice on, all the things that affect those who you are serving, right? And it makes me think of Apocalypto. Have you ever seen that movie?
Is that
Oh,
the Mel Gibson movie?
Mel Gibson one. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
So,
never seen it.
so in the movie, you follow this protagonist. His name is Jaguar Paul, and he's like, you see his village get decimated by another tribe, right? And they are going to war. You are following this journey all through, and he gets to the point at the end where he has freed his family. He's walking, and you see the Spaniards floating on boats coming to the land. And in that moment, you get this sense of, here we are fighting once against each other,
Hmm.
but the real enemy is about to come on our shores. That, for me, that's the picture of what, you're saying is like, here we are, traditional, uh, public and charter, and all these, we're doing all this infighting and trying to control the black body, black students being the new cotton, and all of that you've referenced, and the real enemy is still just trucking along to our shores, and we're not. What will we do about it is the question, right?
I might take a different angle on what you just said, and you're an educator, so I would run this by
Please.
you. Our biggest enemy is illiteracy. Our biggest enemy is innumeracy, right? Like so many of our problems would be solved if we were raising a generation of young Black people who are coming online and fighting the power from a position of strength, meaning fighting the power from a position of being able to understand the world they live in and decode. This is why teaching has to
Right.
be political for Black educators. You're preparing
Yes.
young people for something different. Now, when I talked about those teachers before Brown, 1954, they were doing what they were doing for their time. So I
Yeah.
shouldn't be overly nostalgic about it because we're never going to go back to that time. Chris Emdin,
Right.
I saw respond to something. Maybe it was something I said when we were in a forum together, and he said, "Today's educators have to be prepared for the time that we are in." Right. So it's nice to go back and see that history and understand that history and get whatever examples you can get out of it. But
Right.
today we have a man running for office right now that is threatening to shut down all of the government and put it underneath him like he's a king. And that means that there's going to be less civil rights protections. That means that police officers are going to have full immunity across country.
Federal immunity.
Just blanket immunity. If we're not teaching our young people about the potential of the world that they are living in, we're not preparing them. And education is supposed to be preparation, right?
That
Supposed
part.
to
Yeah.
supposed to be intellectual development and preparation for life. And right
Yeah.
now, I think we're sending our kids. There's some cities where we're graduating kids at 80, 85, 90% rate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at what happens to them after that. And then you realize that graduation rate isn't telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? We put
Mm-hmm.
people through 13 years of something and they're not prepared to do anything when they get out. Well, that's not education. And here's the thing about my Black educators that I would say the reason I am a charter supporter is because I want my people starting schools when they have ideas. Like there are Black educators who are sick of the systems that they are teaching in or working in, not because they hate the system, but just because the job is terrible, right? They have bad administrators. They're reporting to people that don't know nothing. They have people in their district offices who are putting out mandates who haven't been in a classroom in years, right? And my thought to them is, well, you should be running my child's school. Like you've
Mm.
got all these years of experience and all this fancy book learning, and you done went back and got like a master's degree and done all this stuff, and you're still in the classroom. You should be running my child's school,
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
district. Take it over,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. But I think it's also there is a notion to which some folks, they feel like they're operating in their zone of genius in the classroom, and to
Mm-hmm.
step out of that would be,
Mm-hmm.
to borrow from the adage, fish out of water, or to step out of that would be relinquishing something that they feel, drawn to. And, I felt that stepping out of the classroom and
Mm-hmm.
into school leadership was, I knew that the sacrifice would be that, yeah, I could really affect change in these 75, maybe 100 kids. But stepping out of the classroom means that now I can potentially affect the teachers who would have a greater impact on those students, right? And so, but that sacrifice sometimes is hard for folks, and rightfully so. But I
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm.
think that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be. It is in our present system and how it's set up today. But which brings me to my question for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is, if we could just freedom dream together,
Mm-hmm.
what could, what could that look like? What could a vision towards the future of public education look like? And I guess the part two of that would be, what steps should we be taking now to get to that reality?
Mm-hmm. Well, the second part of that is the easiest part, I think, in some ways. Like in terms of steps, we have an educational mandate with the public. The public doesn't have great public understanding of education. You go through
Hmm.
13 years of school, and the one thing schools don't teach you is about school, right?
Hmm.
They don't teach you about the institution that you're in, right? Like you're in this
Hmm.
institution, but it's like a fish in water type of thing. You don't understand you're in water, right?
Yeah.
And we should be teaching them that. We should be teaching them about their metacognition, and we should be teaching parents and the public just about the educational process and policies, right? So that
Hmm.
they know what to demand, what to think about, what not to accept. So I think that that's one of the first steps to go in the good direction. But
Yeah.
if I could dream of dreams, first of all, I hated school. I was gonna be real honest with you. School was boring as hell, still boring as hell. And anybody wants to fight me on this, go in as an adult and go back and do a day of high school. Just go back and do a day of high
Hmm.
school. I dare you. And then come out and tell me why we're giving our kids such a hard time for being disengaged from what they're going through. Man, I hate it. So what I want to see
Hmm.
are some schools that are for untapped interest and potential and genius, right? And that requires experimentation. I'll give you one
Hmm.
kind of example. In the 1970s, the federal government gave Minneapolis a whole bunch of money, and they said, create this zone and make it a demonstration project. Just take away all the schools and make all new kinds of schools. So they had
Okay.
hippie schools. They had a school in the college, in the university. They had more like union trade type schools. They just had a whole bunch of stuff. Open schools, free schools. Um, uh, that was a boon for the rest of the district because they were given the money and the time to experiment, to do what you're saying, like to
Hmm.
dream up what they could do for their kids. I think we need some more of that. Like I think we need
Hmm.
some more federal money to do some demonstration stuff. Now, if I was like my brother Sharif El Mekki, he might just
Shout out
say,
to him.
"Yeah, shout out to Sharif because Sharif is a dope educator, and he's building a Black teacher pipeline. He is doing the work, which is creating the infrastructure. You need a pipeline, you need teachers, but he would probably say, freedom schools. We
Yeah.
right now already have freedom schools, and if you visit, those kids are happy, they're joyous, they're
Yeah.
remembering things. Sharif himself was educated in a school very much like that, and it shows. It shows in
Hmm.
in how he moves in the world, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an
Yeah.
answer. I would ask you that because you're the educator. You're the one with the background and the fancy book learning. So, you know,
It's funny, you know, I think that sometimes it's like the book The Giver, right? Like if you're the receiver of memory, right? Everything's in black and white. You don't see the world as you should
hmm
until you are willing to receive memories of pain and everything else. Then you can begin to see the world in color. It's kind of how the flow of that went. In a similar way, I think that sometimes you can be so inundated with doing the task of schooling that you forget to dream about the possibilities of education. And I use
Mm-hmm.
those words particularly like on purpose, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the practice of schooling is such that you come into this building, you're assigned a room, you sit down in the seat, someone lectures to you. You might, if you're fortunate, you get into some small groups, you do some cooperative learning, you get an extra ticket, you leave, you go to the next class that has another subject, and you do it all over again. And you rinse, wash, repeat, and then you get to the end of the day. Right, somewhere in there, you might have lunch. Well, you'll have lunch because that's federally mandated, right? But you get your food, you do that. That's your one time to socialize, and you go back and do it again. And I'm looking at this, and I see it. For me, none of this centers the kids that I get the joy to serve every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I could dream, and I could start with just normal, like mundane shifts, for example, I'm thinking about things like flexible seating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
about why is every desk like not on wheels? So like we can move the desk out the way. We could sit together. Like there should be a flexibility about what the learning space looks like depending on where we are and what we're doing, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's such a rigidness that sometimes can be depressing if you let it in education. And so for
That's
me,
true.
I want to that frigid, that you know coldness, that the deadness, if you will, in education, and infuse new life into it. Now sometimes that can be seen as an affront to those who who you have to check boxes for people above you, right? And so sometimes being the middle of middle management sometimes can be very hard in that respect. So
Hmm.
if I had a freedom dream, flexible seating, it would literally be tied to what did the students say. Like when we talk about all the framework for teaching that everybody has, like why
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
why is it not that the students are empowered with what good teaching looks like, and they're giving feedback and observations on the teacher? Why is that not happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you're dreaming where I dream. Now, I'm
Hmm.
glad you said all that because, first of all, we don't respect teachers and children. America
Yeah,
hates its young,
for sure.
right? If you look
For
at our
sure.
child policies, it just proves we hate our children. Now, that's a dramatic statement, but I won't go any further than that. Um, in my dream scenario, teachers would have time, number one, to collaborate, and number two, to restructure things. I'd have a 4-day week, teaching week for teachers. So they could have a fifth day to just study, collaborate, change, move the desks around, try different
Yeah.
things, right? And come back on Monday and try it again.
Yeah.
I visited a school that was project based, and I've been hearing project based learning for years. I've been kind of cynical about it. And then I went and visited this school where the students really are in control of what they're learning. So they
Hmm.
dream up the projects that they want to work in. The educators help them align it to state standards. I talk to these kids.
Hmm.
These kids know the state standards more than adults do because they had to
Hmm.
learn it to be able to do the projects that they're doing. I thought, damn, this kid is talking to me about the state standards, and they are turned on because they decided what they were going to study for that
Yeah.
semester or whatever.
Yeah.
I visited a school that had exploratory learning, and the kids got out of the building a lot. And I thought, wow, these are things that aren't like what they're not the bean counting that you just talked about. Like some of our schools have to be that way because they have to be efficient. Children are
Hmm.
units. You got to move units around. There's numbers that have to be on a page, proficiencies, and all this type of stuff. And it has been so corporatized that it's taken the humanity out of the people that work within those systems. Now, do you want to take the humanity out of the people that are spending 6 to 7 to 8 hours with your children every day? Like, is that the
Hmm.
place? I would take the humanity out of banking before I would take it out of schools, right? Yeah, take
Hmm.
it from somewhere else. Put the humanity back into schools. Teachers need to be treated as the professionals that they are. They need to be developed to be the professionals that they want to be. They need the time to collaborate. They are the main character. I think so many people in public education have main character syndrome. But I'm sorry, superintendent, you are not the main character. The main character. Associate superintendent, you are not the main character. Curriculum and instruction department at the headquarters, you are not the main character. The main character is the teacher, and the teachers are the number one. They're the largest workforce in the United States. If we don't get that workforce right, it's it's doomed for the country. That's a national security problem to not have 3 million teachers supported, prepared, trained, and able to express their professionalism, right? To be
Hmm.
treated like professionalism. So my dream would be to start with teachers, start with rethinking their job and their
Yeah,
opportunities to learn, and their time, right?
that's a big
Like
one.
their time is like, I think there's two things that educators have told me for years that really grind their gears and make them want to quit. One of them is the time, like how much time you have to do things in, after school, even stuff you have to spend. And the other is PD.
Hmm.
Universally, I've never seen anything more hated by educators than PD.
Hmm.
It's the one thing
Hmm.
across race, across class, across districts. And I've
Yeah,
never been able to understand it. You probably understand more than I do by far because I've never
yeah.
understand it. Why is it so bad? You know, help
It's so
me.
funny to think about it that way because, like, the work I do in the school as a school leader, but also as a consultant, like I'll go in and do
Do
PE
PD.
for
Yeah.
teachers, right?
I didn't mean to blow
And
up your spot, man.
no, you're good. You're good because these are things that I
Uh-huh.
think through all the time. And part of it is you have somebody coming in, and sometimes what will happen is folks will come in and want to tell the teacher about a bunch of things, but haven't been in the classroom in the last
Mm.
I don't know how long, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So being someone who's in the trenches really does help when I'm talking about a subject matter because now we talk about it on a level like I know what happens when you do this, 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 and this. And when you have sent that email and you're waiting for the response, but the school leadership doesn't get back to you. And so then it becomes a little bit different of a space, but I have to work hard to demonstrate difference before I can build that level of trust in the PD. Because what happens in PD traditionally is you combine the lack of respect for teaching
Hmm.
with compliance. And it is an exhausting experience to have people come in front of you to tell you this is what you're supposed to be doing, as though you didn't have this training. None of it was asked with you in mind. None of it was formed
Mhm,
with you in mind, but yet
mhm.
you have to sit through it. And so that makes you resent the institution, the people who made the decisions, and the person in front of you. And so I get it in a real. It's why notoriously teachers are the worst when we get together in groups. Like
Mhm.
we would kick students out of our classroom for stuff that we do when we're in faculty meetings or in PDs.
I mean, so first of all, I think this is the discussion. You want to prove in education, sit right where we just are. This part of the
Mm,
discussion right now, this fixes education. The teaching, fixing the teacher job and the level of professionalism and ownership they have over the job and preparation and
yeah,
education and collaboration. I feel like that's the sine qua non. You could do a lot of other stuff around the fringes, but if you ain't doing that, you're not really improving
you're missing
education.
everything.
And I would ask you, as an educator, it seems to me like with IB teachers, international baccalaureate teachers,
Hmm.
their PD is way different. It feels
Mm,
like it does treat them a lot more like professionals, like you're teaching
mm,
IB. You're at this level. In some cases, they take you to the Bahamas to train you. So I'm like, damn, I should be an
mm,
IB teacher.
hmm.
Right?
Hmm. Hmm. That sounds
Um,
real good.
yeah, doesn't it? Like, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna send you to Jamaica to learn how to teach IB. It's very expensive, but uh, I don't want to overdo the point. But that is my point. Is right now, like you talk about steps. What are steps we could start taking? A practical step is to start advocating for teachers to be the main character in education.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, let me just say thank you for spending this time as we're rounding out our time. There may be an educator who's listening who's gotten to this point in the podcast and they are navigating what seems to be the political pressures from the outside and the dream killing, potentially soul
Hmm.
sucking schooling experience on the inside while they're trying to fight for best practices, their professionalism, their own very soul in teaching. What advice would you have for an educator trying to navigate that space? And yeah, just some words for folks who are listening.
So this is a tough question,
For
right?
sure.
Because you have to be built different to do what our educators are doing today because of everything you just said. The
Yeah.
different pressure points coming from different directions. You're not allowed just to go in your room and teach. You've got all this other stuff going on. And I don't think that people who don't do that job understand it, right? So the first thing is realize that to be able to be a good teacher, you have to be built different. And if you're not, this might not be for you, right? Or it might be for you for a period of time, for like five
Yeah.
to 10 years. And then
Right.
you can make a decision whether or not it's beneficial. I also think, though, having a voice and expressing your voice, there are a lot of silent educators who suffer in silence. And then there are a lot of educators who fight. They fight back. They fight for their rights. They fight for their time. They fight. They have their union backing them to fight for things that they need.
Organize.
Organize. Right? You know, I'm wearing the organized hat. Um, uh, so that's a non-answer because there's no easy answer for me. For me, I don't have the expertise to say what they should do, except for number one, like when I was in social work, most social workers know when they're burnt out. Most social workers know whether they should be there or not because it's like you draw from a certain well. I never burned out. I loved social work every day that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of competing pressure, interest, and it didn't pay much. But sometimes you're just built different for a job. So I think us on the outside, with the teachers that I talked about pre-Brown, those black teachers, those teachers used to tell the parents what they needed, and then the parents would advocate for the teachers for the things that they couldn't get.
Mm.
So I think one thing is being organized, working with your community, and expressing your needs to them so that you have leverage to have better working conditions, better learning conditions, more rights, more of a say in the work that you do. But for somebody, I call this the Monday problem. When you ask a question like the one you just asked, an educator listening would say, "This all sounds great. What am I going to do next Monday?"
Yeah.
Right? That's the Monday
Yeah.
problem. I need to be able to give you advice on something that you can use next Monday. And I'm sorry, on this particular one, I
Yeah.
think educators should tell us what they need,
For
and then
sure.
we should advocate for it.
I wholeheartedly agree. I would say, you know, the trite responses of remember your why and
Mm-hmm.
things like that are almost like a slap in the face to the work that is, that we get to do. And I think that if educators are listening or getting to that, have gotten to this point, first shout out to you. But the second thing I'd say is if you are navigating that space, I would say that educators have to do the deep internal work of knowing themselves. What are your
Mm-hmm.
triggers? What are your limits so that you can best advocate for yourself? Because sometimes it's like a toxic marriage. We ask the teachers to stay with the schools for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and if that happens, you can exhaust yourself while um, you know the kids still aren't getting what they need because you aren't your best self. And so some of that is going to have to take some deep internal work, and organizing to begin to advocate those community partnerships you talk about, that are so key. I think we've lost some of that magic um, in terms of just building those partnerships with our communities, so that we can together advocate up the chain, through the system to get what we need for ourselves, for our babies, to be able to make the changes we need. So for sure, I think those things are needed. So let me say this, brother. I appreciate the work you do. So appreciate your voice. I say, I was thinking actually about this as you were scheduled to come on. I always appreciate that you can be honest with me. And
Mm-hmm.
there have been things that I have even personally put out that you've disagreed with and you've pushed back on, and I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. Like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we do that enough. The
We should
discourse
talk about
between
this because I
folks.
don't remember what those are.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I, I,
yeah.
I, I'll definitely catch you up like that. But you've
Okay, yeah.
you've you've said some things
Yeah.
that I'm like, I could see where he's coming from, and it's made me sharper, better, more refined
Mm-hmm.
for it. So,
Well, I appreciate
um,
that.
for sure, I appreciate that. And for folks who have or just getting to know you now, could you tell people where to connect with you, how to support your work, and connect with what you're doing?
So you can find me on Twitter at Citizen Stewart. My website is citizenstewart.com. You can find my work there. EdPost, if you know EdPost, you can find some of my work there. But a disclaimer that I would say quickly on what you just said is I've had a massive change over the last 2 years. And I would tell people don't be afraid to reboot your values. My education today, education agenda today is different than it's been for the last 15 years. right?
Mm,
And that happened a year ago, happened maybe 2 years ago, that I had an experience in my life where I rethought all of my values about education and my activism. So you will see this if you go look at my work. You will see things that I wrote 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago that don't match up with anything that I believe right now.
mm.
And I would tell people, don't be afraid to reboot your thinking on things, because I did. So those are places you can find me, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk.
Shout out to you, brother, for the humility necessary to reboot. I think that in uh, times like these, with the choices ahead of us, with folks who are going to dig their heels in the ground and still decide, I'm going to toe the party line versus let me stand up for what I know is true. Folks who are now VP candidates with a person that they've largely criticized. Like it just lets you know where we are as a
Yeah,
nation, where we are as a country. And
it
so
does.
I'm grateful for folks who say, no, I've reconsidered my values and I'm continuing to unlearn, relearn, and push forward. So shout out to you for that. And thank you again for sharing this time with us.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.